Here's Betty. Hi, everyone. Oh, I'm so excited that you're here today. But you know what, Betty, I'm going to tell you.
What?
You remember what happened last week?
What?
You didn't really want to go up that ladder, did you?
No.
We still had high tea, but you just didn't really enjoy going up the ladder so much. But I can understand that because I was really going up there. So that was high tea. But you've been staying with us all week since then, haven't you? Yeah, and I've enjoyed having you here at the house. It really makes me happy. And so when we talked about where you wanted to do today's reading, you said what? The chapel. Do you like this chapel? It's kind of a special chapel, isn't it? And it's really close for you when you stay here.
Yeah, because there's a guest room right, like that right there.
Mm-hmm.
And if you get out and then you go this way, that's the door. And you come in. And yeah.
Yeah, it's really close. Well, this has been a great week, and I've been looking forward to us having a chance to talk today. In fact, I understand you're going to be doing some sort of surprise that I don't know anything about tomorrow. Is that right? Well, why are you doing something special tomorrow?
Monday.
Is it somebody,
Yours.
somebody's birthday?
Your birthday.
My birthday? How did that happen? Oh my goodness, that really went fast. So you're not going to tell me anything about what's happening on my birthday, at my birthday party, are you?
Yeah, I'm not gonna tell you.
Okay, good. Don't tell me. Even if they ask you out there, don't say anything, okay? Well, this is great fun. So I guess that means the next time you and I have a chance to be together next week to read the next chapter, I will be older. Okay, well.
You'll be 74?
74, that is so smart. That is right, I'll be 74. You know what I want to thank you for too? I was looking a few minutes ago to see if you were getting ready, and you were in the room making the bed, putting the remotes in the right places. You know, I don't think everybody out there makes their bed like you do, so I'm really impressed, so thank you very much.
Oh, did you
I didn't even ask you.
Did you see it?
Not yet, but I didn't have, nobody asked you to do it.
Oh, there's two, like, there, I put the pillows right there, and then there's two pillows,
Mm-hmm.
there's 4 pillows, so I put one there, one there, one there, one there, and then, I brought up a different pillow, a white pillow, and there was, like, I think it was brownish, orangish pillow, so I put that there, and then put the white pillow there.
Well, so you've been decorating, you've been arranging things. Do you think that the children of Israel, when they were ready to get into the promised land, had that many pillows? No, I don't think so. In fact, I wonder what kind of beds they had back then.
Probably, just maybe wood.
Yeah, maybe that's something like, what all of you think out there, especially the children watching this, what kind of beds do you think children had back then? And did they have any pillows? And if they did, what they have?
Well, they probably had feathers.
Feathers. And where would they get feathers?
But they would probably use cloth that they use for clothes.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Well, it makes sense to me. All right, well, we'll have to think a little bit about that. And so what we're doing is we're looking at a book today called Numbers. Imagine that, a book called Numbers. And remember last week we talked about Balak, and we also talked about a man who had a donkey. So, yes, this is number 16. This is our 16th time to read with you, everybody. Old Balak, after Balaam's refusal to curse the Israelites, was too scared to go to war with them. The Jews settled down on the borders of his country, and an easy truce prevailed. A kind of Cold War, as we'd call it nowadays. The Jewish boys began to date the Moabite and Midianite girls, and the first thing you know, they were going to church with them and worshiping their heathen idols. Can you believe that? And that was one of the things about which the God of the Jews was very strict. Some of the Jews thought this was perfectly terrible, and others, those that were doing it, thought it was perfectly all right. So the Jews began to quarrel among themselves, and a civil war broke out. Have you ever heard of anybody arguing today about religion? Jews started killing Jews, and old Balak sat back and laughed and laughed and laughed. His secret weapon, you see, was a few good-looking girls. There was no point in trying to kill Jews if he could stir them up and get them to kill each other. But Moses saw through that and declared war on the Moabites, the Midianites, and killed a lot of them. It seems that Balaam had been in on the trick and advised Balak to try to entice the Jews into his church by the wiles of these women that started dating Jewish boys. Come on, boys, come into my church. You'll like the church here. I guess he was the kind of preacher that was always trying to get more members in his church and would use any method that came handy to it. Anyway, in the war that followed, Balaam was killed. After the war, there was some land that the Jews had occupied on the east side of the Jordan River. Two of the Jewish tribes, Reuben and Gad, and part of the tribe of Manasseh, wanted to settle down right then and there and possess that land for their inheritance and not bother to cross the Jordan and do any more fighting. But Moses was of the opinion that this wasn't fair, since everybody had participated in the fighting that won his land. So they agreed that the tribes of Reuben and Gad and Manasseh would have the land they wanted, but their soldiers would go on over the Jordan with the rest of the tribes until they had all won lands for their families. So that the people of Reuben and Gad and Manasseh built cities and houses and barns for their cattle and settled down there for good, and agreed to furnish soldiers to help the others when the time came. The 40 years were now nearly past, and it was about time for the Israelites to go into the promised land. A whole new generation had grown up, and Moses was getting to be a very old man. He called all the Jews together, and like it sometimes with old folks, I guess 74-year-olds do that, began to remember all that had happened. And he told the new generation about the things that God had done for them, and gave them a set of very good laws to live by when they made it into the promised land. All the people listened very solemnly, because they knew it was about time for Moses to die. Then God led Moses up into a very high mountain and showed him all of the land that the Jews would soon occupy. And he died, and he was buried there. Somehow, they neglected to mark the grave, so nobody knows for sure just exactly where Moses was buried. Moses had chosen Joshua to succeed to the leadership of the Jews after him, and had prayed and laid his hands on him, just like our own bishops ordained priests. So Joshua became the Jews' leader. After Moses died, God kept right on speaking with Joshua as he had spoken with Moses. And he told Joshua that the time had come to cross over the Jordan River and possess the promised land. Joshua passed word around the camp, and there was great hustle and bustle preparation. Everybody was all excited and talking about nothing else for days and days. The first city they came to after they crossed the Jordan was a town called Jericho. It sits a few miles back from the river crossing. It was defended heavily, had high walls, and looked like it would be a hard city to take. So Joshua picked a couple of brave young men and sent them across the river to spy on the city and see if they could find out anything that would help them capture it. Right near the gate of the city, and backed right up against the city wall, was a kind of, let's say, a tavern. It was a rough, tough neighborhood. It was the gathering place for people who got drunk, and roughnecks, and rowdies. It was run by an old woman named Rahab, who had lived a hard life. It was very canny. Well, what happened is, she kind of ran the operation there, the tavern, and she knew what was going on around there. She was pretty smart. In fact, she knew many, many of the people there, and some of them really liked her. I mean, really liked her a lot. These two Jewish spies went into Rahab's house and asked if they could have some supper and spend the night, thinking they wouldn't be noticed there and that they might pick up some information from the gossip. Well, wouldn't you know it, one of the people there was a soldier, and when he saw the two Jews, he ducked out in a hurry, and Rahab figured what he was up to. She went to the Jews and said, "You'd better come with me. The police will be here any minute." So she took the two spies upstairs onto her roof and hid them under a pile of hay. Do you think maybe people slept on hay?
They could have.
Yeah, so maybe that's the kind of beds they might have had?
Yeah, maybe she was like, okay, sleep.
That's probably a good idea. It would be tough for me to sleep on hay. I'd probably sneeze all night. So, sure enough, in a few minutes, the king himself and a platoon of soldiers came banging on the door, demanding that Rahab turn over the two spies. Rahab, looking like butter wouldn't melt in her mouth, came out and stood right in the door so that they would have to shove her aside to get in. She gave the king a look like honey on hot biscuits and said, "Why, yes, there were two foreign-looking men here earlier, but they left. The last I saw them, they were hot-footing it for the river crossing. If you hurry, you might just catch them before they get away." The king believed her, and he and the soldiers rode off in a cloud of dust to try and catch the two spies. Rahab went upstairs and uncovered the two Jews and said to them, "I've sent the king off on a wild goose chase toward the river, and you're safe for the time being. Now get this. Everybody in Jericho has heard how the Lord has been helping the Jews, how he brought you out of Egypt and destroyed the army of Pharaoh, how you defeated Sihon and Og, and what you did on the Midianites and old Balaam. And we're all scared to death of you. Personally, I'm sure you'll capture Jericho. And when you do, I want you all to remember that Rahab saved your life. And see to it that I and my father and mother and brothers and sisters don't get hurt." How about that? Well, the Jews agreed, and they made a plan. When they attacked the city, she, Rahab, was to gather her family into her house and hang a scarlet ribbon out the window. And the Jewish soldiers would be instructed to look out for this and not hurt anybody in that house. By that time of night, the city gates were locked and guarded, so Rahab gave the Jews a rope ladder. And they climbed down off her roof on the outside of the city wall, for you'll remember that her house was up against the wall. And her roof actually hung over the wall a bit. The soldiers who had gone hunting them were between them and the river crossing. So the two Jews went along the road a short way. And when they turned aside into the rough hills, which were on either side of the road, and climbed up onto a high hill and found a cave where they could watch the road and still be out of sight.
Where are you?
Yeah, right here. Right there. So what's it start out saying? For how many?
For 3 days.
For 3 days, they sat there watching the patrol, scouring the countryside looking for them. Finally, when the soldiers had given up and gone home, the spies sneaked back across the river and reported to Joshua. When Joshua heard that the people of Jericho were afraid of them, he was greatly encouraged. You know what that means? He said, good deal, they're afraid of us, yay! For if you know you're going to have a fight with somebody, it helps to know that they're scared of you. So, Joshua announced to the people that the time had come to cross the Jordan and invade the land. The Jordan was a pretty good-sized river, and getting a lot of people and all their baggage and cattle and belongings over it was something of a problem. In the confusion of an ordinary river crossing, the people would be easy prey to the Canaanites, so Joshua prayed to God for advice, and God gave Joshua some rather odd directions. And here's where it gets tricky, Betty. I've been to Jericho many times, so's Nana. And I really like Jericho, the city that they're in right now. I mean, they have some really neat things there. In fact, I've got to tell you, they have the best fruit I've ever had. Well, another story. Joshua called the priests to him and told them to pick up the Ark of the Covenant. Now, the Ark of the Covenant was a very fancy chest with long handles on it for carrying. It contained, if you remember, the stones from the Ten Commandments written on them. And the Jews had carried it around with them in their wanderings in the desert. It was the holiest thing they had. Now, for example, this is called a tabernacle right there on the altar. And that's because in there we keep the most sacred thing for us, namely the body and blood of Jesus. And you've seen that when you come here when I celebrate Mass here. Joshua told the priests who carried the Ark of the Covenant to march right up into the river just like it wasn't there, and they did. As soon as they were into the water up to their shoe tops, the craziest thing happened. The water coming down the river began to pile up just as if it didn't dare to come near the Ark of the Covenant. The water downstream continued to flow on down toward the Dead Sea. And the water on the north side kept piling up higher and higher, but as long as the priest stood there, it didn't flow downstream. So the whole company of the Jews marched across the Jordan on a dry riverbed and camped on the other side. Now you may remember that that's probably one of the stories that Moses was telling to them when he and his friends first left Egypt and they walked across the Red Sea. And remember, the water all came back down and droop. Not too good news for the Egyptians. So the priests carried the ark across and came out on the opposite bank, and as soon as they were out of the riverbed, that huge pile of water went whoosh, yep, and flowed on down the river toward the Dead Sea. And lo and behold, everything was just like it had been before. So, Betty, why don't you read the rest of it?
Okay. Of course, the word of what had happened got around, and everybody was afraid of the Israelites because they knew God was helping them.
Wow. Well, thanks for finishing that, and that's a good lesson for us today. You know, a lot of people get nervous and they worry. Are you worried right now about anything? No, I know you're not, and that makes me happy. Of course, a lot of people are scared right now about COVID-19, aren't they? Yeah. And we're all trying to keep safe here. But, you know, there's an old saying I'd like to tell you. I hope you'll never forget this one. And it goes like this. If you worry, why pray? If you pray, why worry? And so what that means is, if we're worried right now, it's time for us to pray. And once we pray, we don't have to worry, because it's all in God's hands. You know, one day, years from now, when you think about the stories that I've been telling you, and you think about our friends out there who've joined us, you're going to remember that we did this reading at a time when people were kind of afraid. In a moment of history, it'll be there.
Sick and mostly just getting sick
I know.
of like in the air goes over to you, and
Mhm.
you accidentally breathe it in, not knowing that you breathed in.
Mhm.
It's not as you can't get sick.
So that is good that you know how that works. That makes me very happy. And that's why when you and I go places, what is it that we always do?
Get hand sanitizer and
Mhm.
wear a mask.
Wear a mask, and then we also,
Wash.
and then we wear gloves too, don't we?
Yeah.
So we're really being safe and we're being cautious. But I think what we need to remind everybody out there is don't be afraid. Fear not. Remember this, that Jesus looks at us and he says, be not afraid. Remember when St. Peter began to walk on the water? Because Jesus is walking on the water and Jesus called him out. The moment that St. Peter started to doubt and have fear, he began to sink. So be not afraid, everybody. Just walk with Jesus. He'll make sure you don't sink. God bless you. Fun being with you. And this time next week, we'll see everybody again. Bye, everybody.